Evening, everybody, or I should say good morning, because I'm probably going to be posting this video for 8 a.m. Sunday, and it's directed at a couple people. And I've written out a script because I'm kind of sick. You'll probably hear me coughing even more than usual during this video, so I needed a little help, and I actually had to go through about a few hours of real work to put this together. So I'm just going to read from the script and ad-lib some shit as I go along. So yesterday I was called up by two friends, both of them progressives, for sharing a John Stossel video for Reason TV that taunted celebrities like Michael Moore, Oliver Stone, and Danny Glover, as well as Dr. Noam Chomsky for their erstwhile support for the government of Venezuela. Specifically, I was told by one of these friends that the report provided no data to substantiate the argument that Hugo Chavez's policies led to the rampant hunger, runaway inflation, skyrocketing violent crime, and other day-to-day crises that currently plague Venezuela. Now, the second person that objected claimed that the reason for all of these issues was not the government of Chavez or his successor and incumbent president, Nicolas Maduro, but rather, quote, the Rothschilds, the princes of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Bilderberg Group. Now, oddly enough, the first person didn't call it the second one in asking for data and evidence of that. Well, I'll entertain that theory a different time, or I guess he can send some supporting arguments for that. It's not my job to make your argument for you. These friends of mine are also welcome to peruse my 7 hours of Testigo Venezuela interviews. I'll put that in the link when I'm done, in the description, sorry. Interviews with 3 people from Venezuela that discuss in depth their own experiences concerning Chavez's so-called Bolivarian revolution that began with his election in 1999. Now, here are some of the different charges that Stossel brings up, and I have taken it upon myself to bring whatever evidence or data for this that was not contained in his video. So I present to you my work from this evening that I've titled, Why I Probably Know More Shit About Venezuela Than You Think. So hold on. Let me just... Yeah. Should have put it on the first slide, but doesn't matter because you guys can't see it anyway. But anyway, so that's I put this together today. Yeah, I could have done a little more of a lively thing for today. Now, the first thing that I found was after 7 seconds, Stossel says, just outside, people suffer and die, while talking about Venezuela's leaders. Now, please take a glance at this article from The Guardian. I'll put the link in the document, but I actually have it in the script, but anyway, I'll put it in the document later. It's a progressive left paper from Manchester. It's well known throughout the world. It's not a conservative paper, and it says, and it supported the pro-Venezuela Labor Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, and it said on July 26th of this year that as a general strike was set to begin, more than 100 had died and hundreds were arrested in anti-government protests since April of this year. Now, let's contemplate that for a second for you progressives. When some asshole gets shot in Ferguson, Missouri, after robbing a store owned by an Indian man, and then there's fucking protests, then you call that injustice. But you have people all over the country of Venezuela, and these are the people that just died officially during the protests. Now, there's a lot of people that allege that there's other people dying or being killed through other means. Now, will I discuss it here? No, because you asked for definitive proof. So we'll only talk about shit that I can prove. Let's go back to the presentation. So it says after 16 seconds, that Venezuela was once Latin America's richest economy. Now, if you look at the chart, it says, unfortunately, Venezuela has long been a nation that has been dependent to one degree or another on its massive oil reserves. However, the worst economic crisis that preceded the Chavez era saw an inflation rate of only 84% in 1989. Under Maduro, that shot up to over 800% in 2016. These statistics come from the Banco Central de Venezuela, whose president is Nelson Morenes. You can see in the photo, appointed by none other than Nicolas Maduro. So is that a Bilderberg propaganda there? I mean, who the fuck is putting that propaganda out? It must be that Venezuela's own government is infiltrated by Bilderberg propagandists. And then you have um, why does that matter? Okay, so in July 2017, London's Financial Times released an analysis of the economic crisis in Venezuela and charts that showed that in a short period of time, food and drink prices in the South American nation had increased over 300%. This caused a drop in almost 40% of citizens that were capable of buying chicken and beef, which were once common staples of the national diet. Meanwhile, potatoes, which were as recently purchased in 2014 by about 10% of Venezuelans, are now bought by over half of them. This isn't due to some holistic attitude toward dieting. Now, I am going to have to add that link later too. There's some other videos where I just put them on the page, or some other slides, I mean, but such as this one, where it says it costs $150 to buy a dozen eggs in Venezuela. So that's just getting to the heart of the matter, where you want data. Yeah, here you go. This is a real country where it costs $150 to buy eggs in Venezuela. Dozen eggs. So, and then you talk about what this has done to people, and after 25 seconds, it says, Venezuela was once Latin America's richest country. Still talking about that. Now, this is a report from the Miami Herald from 2017. It said that in Venezuela, they were doctors and teachers. To buy food, they became prostitutes. Okay, so that's what you're talking about here. These men and women are not fleeing a war, a flood, or an earthquake, but rather Nicolas Maduro and his gaggle of frauds governing their nation. Okay, so next slide. This is from the Business Insider. Okay, again, I'll add the link later. It says there's Venezuela admits homicides soared to 60 a day in 2016. Now, Stossel said that a person gets murdered in Venezuela every 20 minutes. So I guess you have him beat. He did lie. Technically, it's only every 24 minutes. So I guess you're really talking about a huge lie there. I mean, every 24 minutes. I guess that's a really safe community there, or safe nation. This is really this is really a country where you want to go and take your kids to the playground or something like that, right? So after that, this actually took less time than I thought. After this, Stossel goes on a trash talk spree, calling out Chavez's fanboys and girls like Chomsky, Glover, Michael Moore, and others. It is here that we get to the question of who fucked up Venezuela. Was it the capitalists and international finance that ruined the country by massive export of capital, like Chomsky has alleged? Or is it, as Stossel contends, the Chavez regime and its supporters that have plundered the country, driven away private businesses, and destroyed even the linchpin of the economy, the national oil conglomerate PDVSA? So then we'll go to the next slide in this presentation, since I put in all this nice work for you people. Now, let's see. To provide some context, Venezuela was governed up until 1999 by alternating governments of the Christian Democratic Copay Party and its socialist rival Democratic Action. What has changed since then is that under Chavez and then his successor Maduro, the constitutional power of the executive has been vastly expanded. Does that sound familiar to anybody here in the United States? I mean, that's certainly a problem when you have the concentration of power in only one branch of government. This means that Venezuela was a mixed economy up until Chavez's election, where an average welfare state dovetailed with a fairly free private sector. Under Chavez, universal health care was achieved, but in large part due to the importation of Cuban doctors. So this has caused Venezuela's health professionals, including doctors, to be crowded out of the market. Moreover, Cuban professionals that were a part of the program have themselves defected to Colombia and reported that the system is racked by fraud, according to the Miami Herald. Now, the Miami Herald is in one of the most hotbedded, one of the most vibrant hotbeds of Cuban and Venezuelan dissidents. So, I mean, you can take it for what it's worth. Maybe you don't trust it, but according to the Lancet, which is the second most cited medical journal in the world, they operate out of London and they're owned by Elsevier, which is they're an academic imprint in Holland. Venezuela's government is limiting the access to medical care for protesters. So does that mean? I mean, I'm gonna like ask you. Does that mean healthcare for all that the progressives have advocated for? Because I thought healthcare for all meant that if you disagree with the government still takes care of you, right? Because I know a lot of the progressives that I see online, not you two. I'm not talking about you guys specifically, but a lot of those people, they say, well, even conservatives should buy onto universal health care, right? Well, I mean, in this case, and maybe this is an exception, you can see that healthcare is dominated by one group, which is the government, and they use it to fuck people when they don't agree with the government. And they basically let them die in the streets unless a bunch of protesters come and deal with it themselves. Okay, so next slide. Let's proceed. So we're talking about the healthcare crisis in Venezuela, which is beyond the protesters, because in all honesty, there's still, it's not as if there's tons of protesters and that they're dying. I mean, it's not as bad of a situation as, I mean, people, we don't know exactly what the statistics are there. So, unfortunately, as of today, the system has collapsed and Venezuela is in a public health crisis. In September, Venezuelan doctors protested at the World Health Organization office in the national capital of Caracas. According to Reuters, 85% of medicines are suffering a shortage in Venezuela. So 85% of medicines in Venezuela, there's a shortage of them. Now, how can you blame international capitalism for this when Venezuela's medical system is sustainable not just through is sustained not just through a universal government-run payment system, but through the infrastructural aid of Cuba? And as revealed in March by the Pan Am Post, which is widely read about Latin American matters, not just in Venezuela, but throughout, two Cuban doctors confirmed the previous story about fraud and claim that they were forced to fabricate medical statistics. Now, I want to ask either of you guys, one person in specifically, did the Rothschilds force them to do that? Because if I'm not mistaken, the Rothschilds don't write the paychecks of Cuban doctors in Venezuela. And in addition to the issue of public health here, we can now ask you, the people that doubt me, where are we supposed to get accurate data to buttress Stazel's arguments, even if even Cuban doctors claim that the existing data has been tampered with? So, so that's about it for the Cuban healthcare system. Now, I went through a couple of issues there. There's the issue of, now they're importing Cuban doctors. Okay, so native Venezuelans that have gone to school and wanted to become a doctor, they basically are priced out of the market because you can get free doctors from Cuba, and Cuba in exchange, I think, was receiving large oil infusions from Venezuela at either a discount or basically for free or something like that. So it's wreaked havoc on the medical educational system in Venezuela, and it's forced people to, like was mentioned earlier. So some of these people have to resort to prostitution in Colombia. So that's no joke. Um, let's go to the next topic. The next major topic we're going to discuss as regards to the economy. Now we've already gone through inflation. We've gone through the health crisis, and we're going to talk about um, the issue of petroleum in Venezuela. Now, so a lot Chavez's supporters, including Glover, Penn, Moore, Chomsky, and others, are huge critics of global warming, or as they started calling it, climate change. Glover even claimed that the Haiti earthquake was due to climate change. Why then did they continue to support the Chavez regime, as it ran so much of the non-oil business in Venezuela out of the country? So basically, my question here is, you have this oil regime that now before 1999. Let's not pretend Venezuela was perfect, because obviously there was a reason Chavez came to power, and I've said that. We've discussed that in my interviews with Carlos and Juan Carlo and Gabriel. If you want to see them, and you should see them, because I need views, and also because they're good. They're good videos, and these people are speaking up about the issue in their country. Um, so nobody's pretending the country was perfect, but at least there was a vibrant non-oil economic sector that was going on. Now, what's happened under Chavez? It's gone away, and I'll show you that right now. So you have Venezuela's non-oil economy has gone from $13 billion in 2006 to fuck. Hold on. Sorry, guys. It's gone from $15 billion to about $13 billion in 2006 to less than $5 billion in 2015. Now Chavez died in 2014, so this was all going on during the last years of his regime, and then he died, and then was taken over by Maduro. um, so you can see here that basically they rotted the entire non-oil economy to the shitter, and it's become basically a petroleum dictatorship. It's what do they call it? A petro state, I think they call it. That's what a lot of these Democrats now call Russia, because they are too jealous of the fact that Russia also has superior vodka to the United States. Now, in the past 2 months, just in the past 2 months, Venezuela has been dealing with the purge of its oil conglomerate, PDVSA, Petroleos de Venezuela SA, and it's become so mismanaged that Maduro has sacked the CEO of PDVSA's U.S. operations, Citgo, in favor of Chavez's cousin. So they appointed. This is what you call good governance in Venezuela. You fuck up the oil company that's basically giving you free money by putting in power people that are close to the regime, and are relatives, in fact, of people that have been, for example, the president of Venezuela. So they also arrested Nelson Martinez on November 30th. He was the CEO of PDVSA, not of Citgo. Citgo is the U.S. Subsidiary of PDVSA. Now, bear in mind, these are not Yankee puppets, although 5 of the 6 Citgo executives among the 60 arrested in the latest roundup are U.S. citizens. However, all the people in question had been appointed either under Chavez or current President Maduro. So whose mistakes are they correcting? They're trying to correct mistakes that they've done since 1999. Venezuela's been governed by these same dumb fucks since basically 1999, and yet, my friend who was in the chat, what was it, Friday, was telling me, it's the fucking Jews and the Saudis and the Bilderbergs and the Rothschilds, and I'm surprised he didn't blame Wesley Snipes or something. But look, if I can support evidence of my theory, I'm sure that you could support evidence of your theory as well. So after this video comes out, I'm waiting with bated breath for either of you guys to put out a video, but especially the Mr. Bilderberg there, who is a pretty nice guy. But I mean, honestly, let's be serious here. You want to accuse the Bilderbergs, fine, but I want some proof. I'm fucking giving you proof of what I'm talking about, and I expect reciprocity here. So back to the presentation, I should say. Um, Here we go. So this is the slide with this is Nelson Martinez, I believe. I think this is Nelson Martinez. He was just arrested in November, and yeah, so this is a guy they appointed in August to head PDVSA, and by November they blame him for the whole fucking clusterfuck, and that's because Venezuela's crude oil output hit a 28-year low just before the arrests. Okay, so they they decided that they'd appoint a guy to make him the scapegoat for basically running their oil conglomerate into the ground. So I mean, I want to understand how you blame anybody else for that besides Maduro and Chavez. So the other thing that was mentioned in the video with John Stossel was that Chomsky, who considers himself and is considered by the left to be this, this big balls guy with the fucking international man of intellectual mystery or whatever, some sort of genius or something. And then you'll see him in a fucking video mumbling like some sort of guy who's just had his, somebody. He basically talks on every video like somebody who's ordered something for breakfast at Denny's, and somebody basically, the cook like sprayed dandruff all over his eggs or something, and that's the way he talks, like some sort of impotent old man who considers everything he says like some sort of nugget of gold, and that's the way people assume that the things he's talking about are. Now, granted, maybe that's a better tactic than being a sarcastic Dallas Cowboys fan who just does videos in his office, while dealing with strep throat. But, to each his own. There's different methods of presenting evidence. Chomsky didn't present any evidence. He just spouted bullshit. And if you really look at the situation in Venezuela, one of the things that he said was, "Oh, it's capital flight. They fucked us because we needed we need to keep those damn capitalists from investing their money elsewhere." Now, I'll give you one thing: there was capital flight, but it's not by any capitalists. It's ironically by the opposite of capitalists. It's by people like you guys, like the socialists. Or, I'm not going to blanket it. I don't know what you guys believe. If you believe in socialism, I have a message for you later. But be it as it may, it was not by capitalists. So let's go back. So this is from El País, and it says on the trail of Chavistas in Miami. So let me see if I can actually like read through the article. What the fuck is going on here? See here. Stop. Let me see if I can find that article. Here we go. I'll pull it out here, and we can read it, and you can all get your lesson in El Castellano today, as they say in Argentina. It says, on the trail of Chavistas in Miami, the Venezuelan exile follows the trail of officials and sympathizers of the regime of Maduro settling in the United States. Now, I know it was not exactly the most fluid enunciation of this, but let's go through. It says the Venezuelan elites. This is from El País in Spain, in Madrid. It says the elites of Venezuela that have made a fortune under the rule of Chavismo, who are called the Boliburgueses, which would probably be a merger of the words Bolivarians and bourgeois in Spanish, have found in Miami a refuge to protect their money. We do not know precisely how much or who they are, but we do know that some of them are doing important investments in the city, in the state of Florida. I'm talking about Miami, uh, of which in the last decade they have received it has received thousands of Venezuelans fleeing the insecurity and the I guess it would be the Carencias would probably be the inflation because it's getting more expensive. Cara in Spanish, that the country is suffering. The representatives of the exile and of the opposition have mobilized to find them and denounce them to the American government. Now, full disclosure, I may be knowing something about this that I'm working on, and I'm not going to talk about it now because I'm kind of working through the system. But I'd like to, if you're a Venezuelan exile who wants to work on this, I have some information that you might want to know, and we can, collaborate because I don't like these Chavista assholes either because they're a bunch of scumbags. But that's me editorializing. You guys want proof. So, beyond this, and you can probably see this. Let me see if it's on the presentation. I think I did. Yeah, you see the link there. Let's go back to the presentation. So you can see the link to El País. So you can peruse that at your own leisure. And if you don't think that that's good enough, I mean, I've brought enough sources here. There are not sources that are the Murdochs or the Koch brothers or any other mascot that you want to talk about of right wing Hitler people. Like I get called all the time, even though I've never worked for Koch and I've never worked for any of those people. I've only worked for smaller businesses and one multinational here in the United States that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And then you have here, we're talking about the actual capital flight. And it says, so in 2015, an HSBC whistleblower revealed that billions of dollars in Venezuelan treasury funds were being stored in its Swiss accounts, more than any nation apart from the UK and Switzerland itself. These funds were not being stashed by Venezuela's commercial tycoons, but by members of the Chavez regime, as indicated by the fact that his own bodyguard, Alejandro Andrade, was the name listed on the account. Andrade was named at one time as the national treasurer and then the president of the Economic and Social Development Bank of Venezuela up until 2010. So I want to ask you, I didn't see any mention of Bilderberg in that report. I didn't see any mention of Benjamin Netanyahu or Prince or King Salman of Saudi Arabia. It's only a bunch of dirty fucking socialists who are taking the money of tax-paying Venezuelans and using it. And there's more. I mean, the evidence just compounds. Here is the last. I think this is the last slide. But even if it isn't, then whatever. So Maria Gabriela Chavez, who is the youngest daughter and was the first lady of Venezuela when Chavez got divorced, is estimated to be worth $4 billion, and she was appointed the UN ambassador, I think, in 2013. So you're basically seeing, well, what do you have here? You basically have nepotism. You have I hate it that you have to click twice to present to everybody. That's the fucking Google. They can't make things simpler. Maybe it's because they're afraid you might accidentally like present your porn or something. But yeah, that's a thing. Now, granted, you might say, well, maybe she's the most qualified person for the job. Now, I want to ask you, like, what major advances has Venezuela done in the UN? They've basically become a pawn of Cuba and Iran and Russia and China. Now, I don't hate any of those countries. I'm not a fan of any of those countries, but I don't think that I don't think that Venezuela has been strengthened under the Chavez's and under the other moron that runs the country, Nicolas Maduro, who was a bus driver. And you can see that from the from the dietary data that I talked about, with the potatoes and the meat and whatever. And then you have, what else did we talk about? We talk about the public health crisis and that even Cuban doctors are defecting. And then you have the issue of them fucking up their own oil company. And then you have capital flight by the actual socialists. So what else do we have to prove here? I feel personally that I've given enough proof. So I have one message for anybody who really wants to, um, support this regime, and that's this. I fucking don't give a shit how many other people you can blame. They're not the president of Venezuela. They're not running Venezuela's oil company. They're not giving Venezuela doctors. The Venezuelan government is to blame for its own misery, or the misery of its citizens. And those of you that would like to, deflect the blame, I don't deflect the blame when I see Donald Trump doing something wrong, or when I haven't seen much to criticize my preferred leader, Rand Paul, of. But if I do see something, I hope that I'll be able to be critical of him. But when you make excuses like bringing up the Bilderbergs and Saudi Arabia for what's going on in Venezuela, you look like a total idiot. And I'm sorry, but Venezuela is not likely to get better soon. I don't see the regime falling. I see more people dying, and I think that we should really start taking it more seriously, because these are people. They could reach our shores. They could. I mean, it's already a massive humanitarian crisis. You're seeing. I think at one point it was tens of thousands of people crossing the border into Colombia every day. I think some people were crossing into Brazil as well, which is not in great shape. I've spoken to somebody from Brazil about the crisis. So instead of scratching your balls or whatever, and I'm not talking specifically to you guys. I'm just saying in general to people that are progressive. um, Instead of pretending to say, "Oh, we support progress and better, a better government for everybody." I mean, you can find no better example of a government that claimed that it would help its people that ended up destroying everything that was worth keeping in than the government of Venezuela. And I see, I have a frustration that I see of people that I know that are very quote unquote conservative, especially some people that are of the pro-Israel group. And they're like, well, why do you give a fuck about Venezuela? And my response is, why should anybody give a fuck about you? Venezuela is one of the most important stories going on in the world today. There was just these protests breaking out in Iran, and I guess, I mean, I support protests in Iran, but I'm not in favor of going to a war in Iran. I'm not in favor of going to a war in Venezuela. But once you inject the issue of Islam into it, there's a lot of people on the right that will say, oh, Iran, the biggest fucking story of all time. With Venezuela, this shouldn't be a political football, even though I do think that it invalidates a lot of the underlying justifications for socialism. We're still talking about having people be able to live a prosperous and safe life in their own country. And thanks to socialism, thanks to Chavez, thanks to Maduro, and thanks to the utter lack of self recognition and self-awareness on the American left. Yeah, Venezuela is going to continue to suffer, and I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not going to turn my eyes away from it, and I hope that you guys do research it, and I'm waiting for that rebuttal video, buddy.